Welcome to HotSpot. I am your host, Gabriel Moncau. Today, joining me, as always, is Mr. Phillip Tran at the top right, my trusty co-host. At the bottom left, we have Dominic Maglione, CS Master Student, aspiring sysadmin, and he will tell you about Linux at every opportunity. Of course, Dominic. Wanted to introduce you properly. And at the bottom right, we have Vineet Raju, planning on applying to UPE in the spring, also a CS Master Student and a renowned web developer. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great, Gabe. Thank you for asking. I would like to initially point out that you did pronounce my last name wrong. It is Maglione. But aside from that, it's been a good... Yes, sir. It's been a good night so far, though.
Well, I've been pronouncing it wrong for months, so good to know. How about you, Vineet?
Also good. I'm doing good. Hopefully, you guys, everything's good there. Trying to stay up. 3:30 a.m. Just trying to not fall asleep during this.
Yes. You're in India, right?
Yeah, I'm in India. Yeah.
That's wild. I could never live like that.
What's your schedule like?
Sleep anywhere between 7 a.m., 10 a.m. my time. Get up 4 p.m., 5 p.m. my time. Yeah, it's pretty rough now.
If it works for you, it works for you, right? But yeah, so today we're going to be covering more of like the recent tech news. We have had some pretty high profile happenings in the past couple of weeks, past 2 or so. I think that the first place that we can start out, we'll save like the juicy bit for the middle, right? And I'll just throw that out there. It's the Apple Silicon chips, which is what everybody wants to talk about. We'll get back to that in a second. But so we'll work backwards. We'll talk about the things that landed a bit ago, specifically everything that's been going on with AMD. AMD, competitor to Intel, for anybody that doesn't know, they make CPUs, they make GPUs, and for a while they've been pretty obsolete, losing out to both Intel and NVIDIA in those respective fields. They dropped their Zen 3 lineup, which was their 3000 series CPUs many months back. I actually upgraded myself to that, and they became very competitive. And now they have dropped both their Zen 4 CPU series and their Big Navi GPU series. As of yesterday, actually, Big Navi dropped, and Zen 4 dropped a couple weeks back, I believe. Maybe?
I'm pretty sure it was Zen 3 that was the most recent drop. Zen 4 is not dropped.
Oh, I'm
yet.
sorry. Zen 2 was the 3000 series. Zen 3 is what just dropped.
Correct. Zen 4 will be the new 7 nanometer.
5 nanometer.
5 nanometer?
5 nanometer. But we can talk about it in a second. So yeah, so the new Zen 3 and Big Navi series just dropped. And what we're seeing is something very interesting, right? We've already seen AMD completely slaughter Intel with their Zen 2 series. Zen 3 is just putting them on top again, because the one edge that Intel still had left was that their single core performance was still a bit better. So for things like gaming, for loads where you don't really care about multi-core performance, Intel was still kind of king. That's no longer really the case. AMD has really just stepped it up again. They are destroying them in almost every metric. I'm kind of tempted to upgrade again, I'm going to be honest. I'm rocking a 3800X myself, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on all this. I don't know what you're running, but...
I can speak that. I did pick up a 1700X back when they first dropped. I was running that in my main system for a while until my motherboard bricked. Why? It's not important. But I'm very much looking forward to the new Zen 4 drop, especially because of I was considering Zen 3. However, the new 5 nanometer architecture is definitely going to be worth trying out, I guess. In regards to that, Intel really needs to innovate at this point. I'll give them props for squeezing so much out of the 14 nanometer.
Very mature process.
Exactly.
Mature.
Right. But I think it's coming at the cost of, especially if you notice the TDP, the power draw, and the cooling on the chips are drastically different. Intel, it's like at the cost of more power, they're squeezing more out of the same architecture. If they could just at this point, they just need to play catch up with AMD. I mean, it's gotten really bad. I remember back, it was 2016, I believe, when Ryzen dropped. If anyone wants to correct me on that, I was in my Spanish class talking with my friend Cole about it. And I thought, this is going to be great for AMD. We're finally going to have some good competition. And we did. All the past years, it's been really good with Ryzen. But it's at the point now where I want Intel to just do something. I went from hating them to saying, guys, please don't go down this easily. It's really looking bad for them right now. I know that AMD actually passed them recently in the desktop for market share. I think they're catching up on laptop as well. And at this point, Intel only has server left? Unless Epic comes in.
And even then, like with Epic, the AMD is catching up pretty quickly too. And also just for people that don't know, so when we talk about architecture, we basically mean the nanometer process by which CPUs are created. So the smaller nanometer, basically the more compact, the more efficient it is. Intel has been rocking 14 nanometer forever.
Skylake, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Farther, maybe. I don't know, but it's been forever. maybe farther. And AMD has steadily been getting better. They went to 10, I think, then they went to 7, which is what they're on right now. And Zen 4, which is what we were talking about, which is set to launch in 2021, is going to be 5 nanometer. Meanwhile, I think pretty sure they're on track to launch 5 nanometer before Intel even gets to 10.
They are, yes,
which
correct.
is pretty terrifying for Intel. We're almost going the other way now, where we're losing competition due to AMD, not due to Intel. And I think that there's two big things that we can talk about here. The first being that for a really long time, we saw Intel never have to innovate. They were really on top of their game. They had no real incentive to dump more money in, despite the fact that they clearly could have pushed their technology further if they wanted to. Instead, they chose to just stay on the 14 nanometer track, not invest too much in R&D, and just stay on it. And what that's led to is now they are pushing these CPUs crazy far, which is why I think it's really interesting when people bring up, they're like, but why is it that the AMD CPU is only running at like 4.3 or 4.4 megahertz? Meanwhile, the Intel one is running at 4.9, but they get the same FPS or they get the same performance. It's because they're just not the same architecture. AMD is more efficient in so many ways that meanwhile, Intel is really just squeezing every drop of performance out of their architecture.
I think on the new spec test for the 5000 series for games that are CPU bound, I think AMD beat Intel in by like 200 FPS or like some insane number. And I think
CS:GO.
I think the Ryzen 7 580X 5800X is actually beating the Intel iCore 9 in multi-threaded workloads in a couple of tests, I think Cinebench and stuff. So I think it's very interesting, and I am somebody who I Intel bash because it's just so annoying when you see this company that does absolutely nothing innovative when they were on the top for so long. I think it's slowly becoming one of those cautionary business tales. Like, this is not what to do when you get market share. And I think if I remember, as soon as the AMD announced their 5000 series, Intel announced their Rocket Lake CPUs, which are going to drop, I think, Q1 2021. And I think they're going to be 10 to 20% faster than the current generation on a 14 nanometer. It's insane how much they're able to squeeze out of their 14 nanometer chips.
It really is impressive.
Wow, they are still rocking 14 nanometer.
They were supposed to go on a 10 nanometer 4 years ago in 2016, and they're actually backporting the Rocket Lake. It was actually supposed to be a 10 nanometer, but it was not working at all. So they're backporting it back to a 1400 and then releasing that. So it's just, so there is a possibility that if Intels are actually 20% faster, we could go back to status quo with Intel having a slight edge. But the point is that AMD is innovating so fast. AMD is talking about 5 nanometer, and Intel's not able to get 10 nanometer working.
Eventually, Intel has a cap, right? They're going to hard cap.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Even if Intel's able to compete in single-threaded, the multi-threaded gap is just going to be off the chart. You can't even put them in the same price range or anything anymore. But to be fair to Intel, people who complain about Intel's prices, AMD did price bump with the Ryzen 5000.
They did, actually. You're right.
All of them are more expensive than the Intel ones. And I don't see a lot of people complaining about that, which is kind of double standard, which I wanted to ask you guys about.
I guess that's interesting. Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers pulled up. I do think that you were right there, that they are a bit more expensive. I think that, at the end of the day, if you're going to hate Intel for doing it, then you've got to hate AMD for doing it as well. The only difference that I can see is that it's not that AMD is leading the charge to actually up the entire industry price for CPUs. I feel like that's essentially what Intel did when they were at the top. They set the standard for what CPUs at the high end would cost. AMD isn't necessarily doing that. They're just pricing above their competitor because they're producing above their competitor. So I think that for me, there is a bit of a, if you want to call it, moral difference there, but I can definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of an interesting game we're playing right now. Intel, to me, has been now in recent years the definition of good engineers or great engineers, but very poor leadership. Because I don't doubt that Intel has the technology to move past 14 nanometer, to push better speeds and be more efficient at the same time. I don't doubt that. But the comparison I had, a friend of mine always used, that they let off the gas. The moment they had a lead, they stopped innovating. And AMD caught up to them very quickly because of that. You're seeing that now also. NVIDIA never let off the gas, and that's why AMD's always been slightly trailing them. However, as Gabe mentioned, we're going to talk about later, Big Navi is definitely pushing AMD into the ring a bit more against NVIDIA.
Yeah, and I mean, so a couple things.
I think another
sorry.
interesting thing. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say another interesting thing is maybe Intel got complacent and they thought people had this brand loyalty that perhaps people have for Apple, and they thought they never shift team red, but people just want the best chips. So if AMD is
Exactly.
making the better chips, people are going to go buy AMD chips. It's not like, oh, I want an Intel chip. Nobody has that,
Yeah.
at least for chip makers. Like, I don't
Pretty
know
much
why.
nobody says that unless you're looking at very specific feature sets like
Yeah.
I need Thunderbolt or something. Then that's
Yeah.
when you would go Intel because you have no other choice. But on
Well,
the
even then, you
desktop,
can get like expansion cards and stuff.
yeah,
if you
nobody
want.
really says that.
Exactly.
It's also very interesting how AMD has really captured they went from a super underdog position with Lisa Su taking the helm as an interim CEO and then turning the entire company around in just a few years. That is incredible.
Oh my, not even just a little, dude. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. It was
I think I
insane.
heard. I think I heard Lina say this. Like any company, at least in any, I guess more so tech space that's doing well, like Tesla or like AMD. They have engineers leading the company. Like Intel has been bogged down by this nonsense management and bureaucracy that they just need to have an engineer at the head who loves making hardware, loves making things faster, and just making better products.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to look to Lisa Su, right? I mean, she joined in 2014,
Yeah.
and it's been like uphill ever since then. And it's exactly what you said. She's definitely like an engineer at heart. She worked at IBM. She worked at Texas Instruments. She understands this whole technology. I mean, I'm pretty sure she graduated from MIT.
Yep, she's an MIT grad.
Yeah, she very, very capable, and clearly not willing to just sit like a lot of the past like AMD leadership, I feel like, and just let Intel take the charge and just take whatever trickles down to them. So I'd have to say props to her because I mean at this point it is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. AMD is fighting a three-pronged war. They're fighting not only the obvious two is in the CPU and GPU space against Intel and NVIDIA, but even within CPU, you have to consider that it's not just desktop and laptop CPUs. They're also fighting on the server space with their entire EPYC series. And right now, they're kind of poised to win all of them, which I think can transition us into Big Navi. And Big Navi is the latest GPU series from AMD, launched to compete against the NVIDIA 3000 series. There was a lot of excitement around the 3000 series, which dropped maybe like a month ago or so. And as we saw, while their performance was absolutely off the charts, the 3070 was set to outperform the 2080 Ti. For like $300 less or something crazy. So very impressive that jump there. We haven't really seen anything like that on the GPU space since Pascal, I'm pretty sure, from NVIDIA. Not to mention way better DLSS, which is their deep learning super sampling. It's the upscaling technology that they have, as well as better ray tracing. So clearly NVIDIA shocked the market with that, and a lot of people thought AMD wasn't going to be able to compete. Since then, the 6800 and 6800 XT GPUs for Big Navi just dropped yesterday, actually. We are recording this on November 19th. They dropped on the 18th. And the 6900 XT, which is essentially the competitor to the 3090, is set to drop on December 8th, a bit later. And the initial reviews that are coming out in the benchmarks look very impressive.
To be fair, just to play devil's advocate, AMD does have a history in the GPU space of releasing the same card with a different name multiple times.
Yeah, they do that.
They pull an Intel on that basically. It's like, all right, we have this card. Let's just clock it slightly higher, add a little more memory. It's basically a different card.
Yeah, I will say.
Everybody's been waiting for AMD to catch up on the GPU side. Like they've been insane on the CPU side, but I guess on the GPU side, we've been kind of waiting for them to actually compete with NVIDIA's top gaming chips. I think before we get too excited, I guess we have to see how they actually perform once they come to consumer hands, because AMD has, I guess, a history of looking really good in their launch events, but then they have a lot of issues when it actually comes to the first cycle of deployment.
Yeah. AMD has disappointed us again and again, so we got to wait and see how it goes. But I will say from the initial benchmarks, I'll let you go in a second, Dom, but from the initial benchmarks, not only are they competing, which is something that nobody thought they could do, but they're actually looking better in a couple of cases. And the ones that I want to mention is that, first of all, because of their smart access memory, SAM, they essentially have this technology that allows the CPU to use all of the GPU's VRAM at once. Previously, it was only able to use it in small bits.
This is only on
256
5000
megabytes.
series CPUs.
only on the 5000 series CPUs for AMD. That is allowing them to actually edge out the NVIDIA cards in a few CPU or GPU bound games. With that said, the one thing to consider about that, which is currently the thing giving AMD an edge in some of these benchmarks, making them look a bit better, that has been confirmed that it will be released on the NVIDIA cards. They say that it already has hardware support for that. And the big push to implement smart access memory actually came from Microsoft on a lot of back-end things, and AMD was just the first to jump on that train. So that's coming to NVIDIA soon, and that will once again give NVIDIA the edge, because in raw benchmarks, they are winning. And if you turn on DLSS, which is that upscaling technology I mentioned, basically what that does is that it makes games look like they are running at a higher resolution, but they are actually being rendered at a lower resolution through AI. And this is something that only NVIDIA really has right now. The AMD equivalent isn't out yet. You can play at higher reses with better FPS because you're rendering at a lower res. If you do that to upscale to like 1440p or 4K, NVIDIA definitely beats out over AMD right now. And if you try to do ray tracing, the NVIDIA ray tracing is still way better. So that's some things to consider when it comes to this graphics card war.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Good news is AMD is coming out with their, like, I guess they're calling it ray accelerators. So they are trying to catch up and like try to get to NVIDIA as fast as possible. I just think it's great for the CPU and GPU space that there's so much competition finally, and that everybody, each generation, like every 6 to 12 to 18 months, is just coming out with something that's so much better. It's very exciting.
Oh, it's amazing. It's gotten to the point where it's actually kind of weird to where I personally believe that a lot of these GPUs, the technology is almost better than what we have to use it for now, if that makes any sense. A lot of the games we have now, minus Microsoft Flight Simulator, don't need this kind of power. And back to what I remember you said about with AMD competing with NVIDIA, it was, again, NVIDIA never took their foot off the gas. Like for the past few years, I mean, just a while back, every time AMD's released this, they got this great launch, this brand new thing, they just reach in their back pocket and just slap it on the table. They're like, boom, I'm done. We're fine. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see where this goes. I will say one thing I have to give AMD credit for still is their power draw is still, I'm big on the power draw. It's a lot better than NVIDIA's. I know, if I'm not mistaken, they put new VGA connections for their GPUs?
I think so. All I know is that AMD has had a huge emphasis on efficiency and voltage and all that stuff.
Yes, they have. I know that the highest end for AMD is the 6900 XT. Has a TDP of about, it was 300 watts, which is still lower than the 3080. 3080, I believe, is at 320, whereas the 3090 is at 350, I believe. Some of the 300s. NVIDIA's cards are very high up there, and power usage.
I think AMD is trying to go for more of a 3080 competitor because the 3090 is just ridiculous and it's so much more expensive. I think Big Navi, if I'm correct, is $500 cheaper or something. Like the 3090 is just ridiculous.
And the 3090,
yes. Yeah. I know the 6900
and all of the competitive cards, like the 37 equivalent and such, are priced $50 cheaper than their NVIDIA equivalents. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, I know the 6900 XT I heard went up pretty well against the 3090. I don't know if I'm mistaken there.
I think it did go up pretty well, and it's, I think, significantly cheaper as well. But I think that those two cards are really just enthusiast cards as people with very specific workloads. They're not really going to be what makes or breaks either of these launches.
And I think I honestly don't think the 3090 is worth the price that it is, given that it doesn't perform much better than the 3080.
It's bad when they have to advertise it as like for 8K gaming at like 60 FPS. It's like, mate, who owns an 8K like anything?
Exactly. That goes back to what I was saying there. It's, the technology is just they're moving so quickly that it's not giving time for like the game space to catch up. I mean, majority of people I know still use 1080p. Like it's not. It's.
I just now jumped to 1440.
I've been using ICE 1440 recently.
Yeah, same.
I will say another interesting thing that comes from all this. I know we're talking a lot about the hardware specifications. I think it's interesting to see how the market is taking this too, though. Because if you look at, in particular, GPU market now, actually, with the release of, I saw with AMD putting out the numbers for, it was a 6900 back a bit ago. They've actually, we know NVIDIA had that terrible launch, 3080 and 3090, where bots, scalpers, bought out all the GPUs in a matter of literally a second. You also had actually a lot of AMD's older cards. I know the 5700 and 5700 XT, a lot of the older cards were actually being sold out, and the prices are going up on them as well, because people are looking at it like, oh, well, new cards out, I can buy all the cheaper ones now. But everyone's thinking the same thing.
Now is a terrible time to buy either CPUs or GPUs. And I know it's such a shame because we've been saying that for like the past like 2 years, pretty much constantly. You know, first it was like the Bitcoin craze, and then it was just like everything was sold out and we had scalpers. And it's all been just downhill the past few years, which is such a shame because it's exactly when all of the big tech was coming out. Like these are way bigger advancements than the years previous. So it's a kind of unfortunate.
Oh, it is. It's weird because you get to the point where once everything's back in stock, everything's kind of balanced out. Oh, you know, give it a few months, the new one's going to drop. It really is. I know that I built my computer back in 2016 with Skylake. It's great because I look back at the receipt now and I think the 1070 was like $380, $400. Why do I think it's normal that some of these GPUs are upwards of $600, $700? It's complete, and CPUs even too. Like you buy 6,700K for like, what was it, $180 or something? And now you're looking at all these processors that are upwards $200-$300.
Yeah. No, it's crazy for sure.
I think going back to Dom's point, even on the CPU side, like even though the Ryzen 5000 series had a price bump, they actually dropped the prices for all the 3000 series. I know it's buying a generation back, but it could be appealing for a certain market of people that, hey, I can buy a slightly older and slower version, but it's much cheaper than anything that I could have gotten for that price before.
And I have to reiterate this as well. There's two big considerations for these. First of all, specifically about what you were talking about, Vineet, the 3000 series are very good CPUs and still way better than what the vast majority of people, even the ones who like custom build computers and like really care about this stuff, they are probably still underpowered compared to the 3000 series. So those are great CPUs. That's what I'm running. I have a 3800X. Great CPU. And the second thing that I was going to say as well is when it comes to all of these comparisons that we're making, you have to take them all with a grain of salt because it's so dependent on your environment. A lot of the times, for no real like reason superficially, if you're running like a 3D modeling application like Maya, or if you're doing editing in like Premiere, different graphics cards from different providers will just perform differently. It's really all about the workload that you're doing, and that's what you have to look at specific benchmarks for that to see what you need, because it's not just about like I mentioned earlier, but just because Intel runs at 4.9 megahertz and AMD runs at 4.4 doesn't mean that something is going to be more performant in what you do. So,
absolutely, that's what makes compatibility very appealing. But also with AMD, especially, that's what made it very appealing when they had the AM4 socket. You could use the same board as the CPUs went up in the lineup with just a BIOS update, and that is what made it very appealing to that degree as well. You didn't have to hot swap your motherboard to put in a new processor. And that actually, I think that segues perfectly too into how, I personally am a big fan of this backwards compatibility and this customization. I know that with the new, if we jump into a different topic here with M1, part of the reason
I was about to transition.
Exactly. Part of the reason why it's so good is because Apple's locking it down even further.
So let's do that properly then. So I think that clearly a good transition. We have been talking a bit about CPUs, about GPUs, and Apple has just dropped their latest CPU, the M1 chip, their custom Apple Silicon chip. Now, we have seen Apple make in-house CPUs before. This is nothing new. It's just that this whole time they've been making it for essentially mobile devices. They've been making it for their phones, their iPads, technically like a TV or something, but basically mobile devices, not their laptops and not their quote-unquote desktops, their iMacs. And now with the M1 chip, they have made a big change, which is that they've gone to the ARM architecture. And this is 5 nanometer, which is what we were talking about previously. And just off of the initial showings of what they have shown in their presentations and of the limited benchmarks that have leaked onto Cinebench 5 and things like that, or Geekbench 5 rather, it looks very impressive. It looks to be outperforming a lot of very similar computers, especially like the XPS 15, for example, which would be the competitor to the MacBook Air, the new one, which would be housing the M1.
13?
Sorry, the 13,
yes,
13. Which would be housing, competitor to the MacBook Air, which would be housing the M1. It's definitely impressive.
And it's very cool. I want to hear what the Mac guys have to say first, then I can give my 2 cents on what I think about M1.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so full disclosure, heavy Apple user. I have the November 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. I use an iPhone. I have an iPad. Whatever, the whole spiel. But I will say,
ecosystem.
It's real. Come on. It is real. The ecosystem is real. There is a real benefit of the ecosystem if you want it. But before we get into specifically M1, I just read this comment on Reddit and I was like, wait, what? What do you guys think about somebody saying Apple just made a more stylish looking Chromebook? Because it's basically they're making it to run iPad and iPhone apps on a laptop.
It is
There's no
interesting.
real, I guess, customization
I don't know
to laptop. I mean,
I don't know if that works. Wasn't the Mac before the Chromebook as well too?
Also, yeah, I mean, I don't think even the MacBook Air is as limited as a Chromebook. Yeah, it can run iPad it can run iPad and iPhone apps, but that's just, kind of a side effect of adopting Apple Silicon. It can still run Mac apps it can run legacy Mac apps, which worked on the Intel platform, as well as apps specifically targeted at Apple Silicon. So,
oh yeah, it'll be absolutely very
let me just clarify something before we jump really into M1. When we talk about ARM, that's the key word here, because that is essentially a different architecture to the times 86 that we all know. Intel CPUs, AMD CPUs, they all run on times 86, even though they have their own architectures. ARM is something separate. And the reason why this is massive is because the vast, vast, vast majority of programs nowadays have been written, and in the past, especially for backwards compatibility, have been written for times 86. So a lot of the times you won't have things running on ARM processors. ARM is nothing new. Apple didn't create ARM processors. This is just their custom one of that architecture. And it's always been known that once somebody cracked ARM and was able to make a good product running ARM that would run tons of different programs that everybody wanted, it would be huge because it's a very efficient platform. It's a very good way of doing things. But so far, this is the first big launch of a major company putting it in one of their products, willing to say, we are going to make all these programs work for it. And that's why I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant moving into the.
Oh no, absolutely. And again, before I let Vineet Phillip get a bit on this too, that's one of the biggest issues right now people are seeing, or this is what people want to see, is how are we going to emulate this times 86 architecture? Because again, as a lot of these programs are written in that, they're not written for ARM. I know from what I've seen initially, a few seem to have run better than expected, which is very, very good. I haven't looked as much into it, so I'm going to let Phillip and Vineet take it.
I can go first. So reviewers have gotten their hands on the M1 Max, on Tuesday. And initial signs are pretty promising. Even with programs running under emulation, they do beat out their older Intel counterparts by, or I'd say around 20% or so. If you're talking about native applications, they perform beautifully on Apple Silicon. In some cases, even beating out high-end configurations of the MacBook Pro 16-inch. And this is a 10-watt TDP chip that runs super cool. So this is really exciting to see what Apple can do if programs are properly optimized for that. For programs that have to be emulated, it seems like Rosetta 2, which is the translation environment that Apple is using right now, it seems to be pretty performant. You get about 80% of your performance running through emulation, which I think is pretty promising for applications that maybe the developers didn't have time to port it over yet, or maybe legacy applications that will never be ported over. The performance is still going to be pretty good. Obviously not as good as a native app, but I still think that Macs running programs under emulation will still beat out a lot of other competitive machines running on Intel. I don't know if you have anything to add, Vineet.
I think just hopping on to Phillip's point. Also, my personal opinion on the Reddit comment that I was saying around earlier is that it's never going to be a Chromebook because Apple has the power and the clout to make developers want to port their apps onto ARM. So I think Google just launched a Chrome native app for ARM I think a couple of hours ago or maybe a day ago. So companies and developers are trying to port over as fast as possible because that's where Apple is a power right in the market. If you're on an Apple device, you're going to have a bunch of users. And I just think that it's kind of overblown that, oh my God, the MacBook can run only 5 apps. Because in time, I think maybe 4 months, even maybe faster than that, most of the apps that most people use are going to be natively on either the Air or the 13-inch, basically in the system ecosystem.
I'd also like to add upon that. You see the that Apple is targeting these lower end systems first. First, the MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and then the Mac Mini. If you think about the target audience of like the MacBook Air, that's going to mostly be people who are doing more lighter weight tasks like note taking, maybe some office stuff. And all that stuff is going to run fine on the M1, emulation or not. The real benefit that these users are going to be seeing is actually the efficiency of these chips. You're seeing very good battery life offerings from both the Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which I think is something that consumers are going to notice a lot more and is going to matter more in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. From what I've seen with
Sorry, just quickly to add, if I remember correctly, the Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro are like, I think like most of Apple's laptop users. And so as Phillip said, especially for the Air, it's mostly high school and non-CS college majors who use the MacBook Air, who basically are just web browsing, maybe Word. Like the use isn't that much to have Apple try to already have all the native apps already in place. And the battery lives are extraordinary. I think that's for me the most impressive part, even though it might seem, I guess, oh, it's 20 hours. That's insane. Like that's like 2 full days of school, which is just insane to think about.
Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. What I was going to touch on with what Phillip said as well is that I've noticed that even then, for just the Air being, as you said, marketed towards people with a lot lighter workloads, I know Apple's been in a lot of third-party reviewers as well. I know Dave 2D did a review on this where the Air is matching the old 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is very impressive. It's a very high-powered machine.
Yeah.
And I've noticed Apple's also marketing. They've been comparing the new M1 actually to their old products first, which I think the tactic there is to first market this towards the environment or the, following they already have, and then expand it outwards. Because even this is extraordinarily impressive. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of these pop up in our next few years here as well. I look forward to seeing them outside of Questrom.
I think my issue with the Air in particular is that it's fanless.
It's actually
and
very,
that I
that's
feel
It's
like
still good though.
It's gonna thermal throttle.
It doesn't.
no,
actually.
I quickly. I know. Dave 2D in his review said it takes 8 to 9 minutes at full performance to start throttling at the Air. But for example, like multitasking on a Zoom call, especially in these times, let's say I have a professor giving a lecture on a Zoom call, and I want to take notes, or like on like Notion, which is also, I guess, very kind of bloated in a sense. It becomes difficult, and the keyboard is just too hard to type. I think it's very interesting that no reviewer so far has checked chassis temperature and CPU temperatures on the Air yet. I think obviously Linus will do it because he's a skeptic.
Yeah, he's a super
He'll do
skeptic.
it.
That's going to be important.
Nobody has given the chassis temperatures yet, which I think is super interesting. Like if I can't type on my keyboard if I'm on a Zoom call, that's a pain.
You're right. And I can elaborate a little more on how they're cooling the Air. They're using a fanless design. So the previous MacBook Air had a fan that was blowing over a heat sink, like a heat fin array connected to absolutely nothing, no heat pipe. So the fan was basically useless. This time, Apple decided to get rid of the fan entirely, and they've cooled the entire machine passively. So they have this huge like the heatsink and a huge heat spreader. So the idea is, all right, get it to the fins first, then get to the heat spreader, and then if that's like really heating up, get it to the rest of the chassis. And that's how they cool the machine. I think you're right, Vineet. Like, if under an extended workload, these machines can't really take the heat, and the entire chassis heats up, that's going to be a very uncomfortable experience for a lot of users. But judging by how efficient and how cool these machines run already, I don't expect that to be too much of a problem. There was one reviewer that I watched, Luke Miani, that was commenting on how hot the chassis got during a bunch of benchmarks. And he said that it ran about as cool as a Mac at idle. So maybe Apple's very efficient chips actually have a place in a passively cooled environment. I mean, you see this in their iPads, their iPhones, high-performance chips that, yeah, they can get hot because they're in this enclosed environment. But now that you've put this into a larger surface area, it's not going to be too much of a big deal.
I think if the chassis temperature or CPU temperature isn't a problem, do you see a real merit in getting the 13-inch Pro versus the Air?
I do, and that's because the Air At a certain point, it does start to back down a little because it wants to stay cool. The 13 has active cooling, which means its performance is sustained throughout the entire workload, no matter how hard you hit it. Also, a very nice thing about these Mac chips is historically, Macs have been really bad with actually keeping the thermals down. This M1 Mac, even with the fan, it stays basically whisper quiet, even under a full sustained heavy workload, which is very exciting to see. You're going to get Macs that are more efficient, faster, last longer, and are quieter. So I really think that this marks a huge shift in the way that Apple's doing things. Before, they had to rely on Intel, and they always had this pipe dream of having a nice, thin laptop that didn't really need to be cooled. Well, you saw this with the MacBook, like the 12-inch MacBook, a passively cooled, I think like Intel Core M processor in there. That thing would thermal throttle if you open the Notes application. But now with Apple's own in-house silicon, you're seeing Apple being able to achieve things that they wouldn't have been able to do if they still relied on Intel.
Man, Intel's just taking blows.
Intel's down and getting kicked. I think this is more for Gabe and Dom as Windows, I guess, and Dom, I guess, Linux user, whatever.
I guess. They doesn't really count.
Don't call me in as a Windows user. Hold on a second.
Don't call him a Windows user. Be careful.
It's almost as bad as being a Mac user.
What do you guys, like, I guess this is kind of irks me about the design choice. 2 ports on a Pro device, come on. Apple, come on. Like, this is, like, I think it's super exciting what they're doing with M1. And I'm super excited what they're going to do. And I think it not only changes the way Apple does stuff, but the way the broader industry approaches ARM and how more companies might
I have a hot take, by the way.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to say after as well.
2 ports on a Pro device. I think that kind of...
I have a hot take on this.
I was like,
ready?
Come on, Apple.
Let Phil go first because I got something to say too.
The base model MacBook Pro 13-inch, contrary to the name, I do not believe that is a Pro device.
And you could be completely correct there.
You don't have to believe it, mate. It says Pro right there.
It says Pro right there, but I do not seriously think that it is a machine that most professionals who are doing stuff out in the field are actually using. If they're using it, then 2 ports is going to be fine for them because maybe they have some like slightly heavier workloads, but they don't need the additional ports. Where things get more interesting is probably the higher end MacBook 13, which I see as more of a Pro device, or even the 16-inch.
We're looking at 3 ports there now.
Really?
Even
on the high end 13, it's only 2. Like you can't buy a 4-port 13-inch anymore.
It is 4-port.
No, it's not.
Joking.
They still.
No, it isn't.
The 13-inch MacBook Pro. Wait, what? What are you talking about?
On the M1, M1 is only 2 ports. No,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the the M1 is replacement for the lower end MacBook 13.
No, but they changed it such that you unless you buy an Intel one on the ARM one.
I know.
The high end is also 2 ports.
I understand that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is this M1 is still targeting. It's a replacement for the low end MacBook Pro 13. It's not a replacement for the higher end Intel one, which I assume will be coming eventually. When I know why they limited to 2 ports. It was an architectural limitation, which really shows that this is a first generation. Yeah, it shows that it's a first gen product. I mean, normally, yeah.
I'm so sketched out by this as a first gen.
Exactly. I want to give a quick take of mine.
I think unless you absolutely need it, I wouldn't suggest buying the first generation of anything. And this is not Apple's fault. The first generation of anything, which is so major.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I want to give a quick take of mine.
Also, no eGPU support, even though ARM doesn't have good GPU support. Only 2 external monitors. I mean, there are downsides to this.
I don't think it's a big deal at this price point and at the segment that Apple's targeting it. But if they continue doing this for the higher end MacBook 13 and the 16-inch, that's where the disappointment starts.
Yeah, hold on. I want to hear Dom's hot take.
I was going to give a quick. It's not really a hot take, but it's from my perspective as someone who's very much, as Gabe so graciously introduced me as, very big in my open source. I have a grudge against Windows and Mac OS, but
and hates everything. Jeez.
Well, okay, so. My first thing is, you're right, it's a first generation device, right? And one thing that I've got goods and bads about Apple, things I like and things I like. A big dislike for me is that Apple has always forced innovation rather. I know their big power move back a few years ago was when they completely removed what was it, USB Type A.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we're not at that point yet. And that always, I don't like ARM, I can kind of believe it. I don't like its architectural limitations excuse. For that reason, it's because you can make a very thin, a very light, very fast device without removing all these ports that professionals would need. I mean, a prime example of that is what I have up here. I mean, I use a ThinkPad that I have running with Fedora. I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 SIM slot, everything on here, and it's a 1.6 pound device. I will say that another thing that bothers me, this bothers me personally, and there's also a different side to it as well, but I don't like how on ARM is big, but Apple is locking down the devices even further. You can't boot camp anymore. You can't really do anything to it. It'll brick. And they have been kind of against this for a while. I'm big on right to repair. Apple's very much been staunchly against letting people into their devices. But I will say, I am glad they have kept to their space. They're not trying to force this on everyone. Apple has stayed kind of in their area of the markets. They haven't really pushed very far, which I'm okay with. They stay on their side. I'm perfectly fine with them doing this. I do find it personally annoying, but I will acknowledge that it does have its uses, and it still is absolutely extraordinary. They're pushing this out of ARM. I personally am still not going to buy one, but I am very impressed with this, and I do hope that I do think we do need to see more ports, especially on pro devices, because if you're pitching these two professionals, you will find that most professionals still use older pieces of technology. Apple can't keep forcing this imaginary growth ahead.
I think they want to go all wireless, mate. That's the only thing I can imagine is in like 10 years, they want all like AirPlay, Bluetooth, anything, no ports, no even charging. It's wireless charging. You put it on a platform and it charges.
You put on the mat,
like,
the charging
it's gotta
mat.
be. Could you imagine? Like, I would not be surprised in the slightest if 10 years from now, there are no ports on laptops anymore. And it's because of Apple.
They're just they're trying to force innovation. And I think, okay, removing the headphone jack, I remember that was still annoying. People got used to it. But it's at the point where they really need to keep at least one USB, some of the things they have, because it goes back to the professional space that people are using older technology for a long time in these fields. They're not instantly jumping to the next new thing. And even then, the newest things don't implement all this. Like, the newest technology still does not implement like USB-C, for example. A lot of it took
that's the thing, right? If you're not using if you're not using new tech, you don't buy a Mac. That's what
I think
you need any sort of anything else.
But that goes into the professional space though pretty poorly, because most professionals again do not use a lot of the newest professional technology. Doesn't.
I think just to counter what Dom is saying, I think Phillip said this in an earlier conversation. For most people buying a Mac, they don't really care about being locked down in Apple's ecosystem anyway. So the fact that
they want the ecosystem, in fact.
So the fact that the RAM is now on the M1 chip and you can't even upgrade RAM.
I mean, you haven't been able to do that for what?
Yeah,
since 2016,
exactly.
anyways. So it doesn't matter.
I just think Apple's losing their I think the professional space is one that they're losing touch with because of that. I don't think, like, for the most people, again, for like as you said, like CS, light more users, it's fine. But a lot of this external equipment that people need, it's getting farther and farther away.
I think you're a dreamer, Dom. I think you're hoping that one day, like, everyone's going to kumbaya under Apple and it's going to fit, or not under Apple, but that one day there's just going to be this company and everybody loves it. It fits for Apple. I think, unfortunately, as somebody who does not own any Apple products, not for technical reasons. I think their work is good for plenty of others that we've gotten into. Actually, in the first episode, if you go back, I think that unfortunately they've gotten their audience dead on. I think
know
their
people,
needs.
like the people, like everybody who would even consider buying a MacBook Air has no problems with the downside of buying this one.
Oh, correct.
In fact, ARM
right.
completely emphasizes that.
Well, that's why I said that in my thing where I said Apple keeps to their space. I apologize. Yeah. They're not trying to branch. They're focusing back with their advertising against their own Macs. They're not forcefully trying to leave that space.
And that's the big thing. So even if we ignore the fact that it is so early days to be this hyped about the M1 chip, like it is not like for real yet, guys. This is very out there for now. Even if we ignore that, people are kind of acting as if this is like the next big wave. First of all, we've always known that ARM was coming. It is going to be a long time before ARM becomes widespread. This is just the first tip of the iceberg. Like Windows machines are not going to switch to ARM immediately. It's not the same audience. People do way more diverse tasks on Windows, and we're definitely not going to see it hitting like more the industry side. Things like, here's a great example. Hospitals have been using the same software since like 1990. Yeah, like mate, they still run Windows XP to make sure that there's no compatibility issues. That stuff is never gonna go to ARM, like ever.
Yeah.
We're gonna be old and decaying by the time that stuff
And it's still
goes
going to be
ARM.
x86.
And it's still gonna be x86.
Exactly.
Not
like, it's gonna
x86
be so
64.
long.
Old school 32-bit x86.
32-bit x86. So it's going to be a really long time, I think, before the industry gets ARM, and I think it's still going to be a while before the rest of like the Windows and especially the Linux side of the industry gets ARM.
Well, hey,
so Apple's just like, this is their field right now.
You underestimate how fast some of these people work. You underestimate how fast some of these people work pretty quickly.
Maybe.
No, I think what probably is going to happen is that Apple does this, and then 3 generations, it's like a super solid device. And then these edge players in the Windows market start adopting ARM because they want to be like, oh, we're like Apple, but on Windows.
Yes.
So, and then that's when the Windows shift starts. But I think we're at least 3-4 generations out from Windows even trying to do anything.
Windows has tried ARM, sort of. It hasn't been very good. It's been awful, okay? The Surface tablet, I think that was an ARM device. It was awful. I mean, the challenge is really getting Windows to a place to support ARM that is, well, sane. I mean, Apple can do it because they're building their devices specifically for this platform. Windows, how are you going to do that?
It's just different, mate. Like Windows has to run everything since ever.
There is an industry-wide, I guess, legacy of Windows half-assing something, or in general, the industry half-assing something, waiting for Apple to do it properly, and then finding, I think, worse ways to do that.
Yeah, it's because Apple's always taken the jump in a lot of these fields, especially. I mean,
they have less risk though, mate. It's like
Exactly.
they can build their entire product, everything from the OS to the hardware. They can custom make anything they want, and it all fits together perfectly because they design it from start to finish. It is a totally different space for other.
Exactly, and they design it just for
manufacturers.
them, their environment, their ecosystem, as you guys were saying earlier.
Using Big Sur, I will tell you, it is so I mean, I've seen videos on this. It feels like Apple is going to make a touchscreen laptop. I know that it'll cannibalize their iPad sales, but the way Big Sur is made, I don't know if they did it on purpose or just a byproduct of their design refresh. It's like everything is so spaced out. Like you can click on it, and then all the sliders are more like finger sliders than like a slider you'd use a mouse on. But imagine if Apple made a touchscreen ARM laptop with a design refresh.
They have to eventually, right?
Eventually they will, but I think
so.
Touchscreens are still a very niche market, especially because their iPad Pro, for example. You're right, they would be basically cannibalizing their own product. I mean, touchscreen devices also aren't.
Yo, this is when it goes.
But
The Mac becomes the iPad again. It's all Apple OS.
I would not be surprised.
There is no Mac OS. Every application can run on any device.
Yeah.
Touchscreens just aren't quick to use either for productivity. Sometimes they're not. Like a laptop, especially. I mean, the iPad Pro has that space pretty much filled. I know I've seen a lot of students here especially use them. They work very well for the note-taking.
Just like rebrand, everything is just a variant of a Mac. A phone is just small Mac. An iPad is just medium Mac.
Isn't that how it's always
Computer is like computer Mac.
Yeah.
It's all Mac. It's just all touchscreen, everything. It all runs the exact same OS. It has the exact same potential, and it's all ARM. It's all Mac.
It has the same pool of like data that you draw from. So like anything that you're working on, it's just you can like, I don't know, you can hand it off to any device. Now, that would be something. Oh, something I've been meaning to like talk about is we can see what Apple can do just with this M1 chip, which is basically like a souped up A14. And this is running on the MacBook Air, the Pro, the Mini. Apple isn't even trying yet. Imagine what they could do on a 16-inch MacBook Pro. Imagine what they could do in an ARM Mac Pro, like a big tower, where they don't have to care about efficiency. They can just do raw power all the way through. And that's going to be really exciting.
I think like Phillip, I share the same sentiment. I think as exciting as M1 is, I'm super excited for like M2, M3 with the 16-inch MacBook Pro or like a Mac Pro. I mean, the possibilities are truly limitless. Like it's going to be insane. It's going to be so fast. And I think if they do that, I guess, and if the prices stay relatively the same, do you think Windows and like other users can claim that I can build the same machine of the same price, which is faster? I don't think so anymore.
I'd like to use one of my swears.
I think they're going to use their. I think they're going to use a different approach. I don't think they're going to say they can build the same speed, but they're going to try and they're going to hit the parts that Apple's missing. Which was the compatibility aspect. That Apple's ecosystem is theirs.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that Apple, they haven't tried to branch out from that. They've kept it the same and it's worked.
I'll let Phillip go, and then I want to point something out as well. Yeah, what's your
right.
swear, Phillip? Tell us.
No, I don't think they can claim that as easily as they have in the past. And if the performance is there, running natively, it's faster than Intel or AMD, and it's faster even emulated. The only thing that you have now is saying that, all right, I'm building a Windows or Linux machine that, all right, maybe fall behind the Mac or be just as good, but it can run more variety of programs. But by the way that Apple is gunning for developers to develop on their platform in the first place, the implementation of Rosetta 2 to make sure that Intel applications still run on the Mac, I don't think compatibility is going to be as large of an issue as it will be. Like right now, like in the future, you're just going to see things working on the Mac seamlessly.
Probably.
For a device that's a week old, the fact that it's already pretty good, like Rosetta 2, the compatibility layer is pretty good. That's very exciting.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
I just want to put that caveat out there. And I just want to say one more thing. We have been talking about Apple Silicon for a long time, and there's one more topic that I want to touch on. It's going to be small, and none of us care about it. But we need to say it when we're talking about business. Yes, but one sec. So one other thing that I want to talk about regarding Apple Silicon as well is that it's really interesting. Now in this podcast, we've talked about two very distinct topics which stem in the same industry. We've talked about the GPU and the CPU sales for like the desktop side and more like the high end of like this powerhouse. And we're talking about some of the other users in a totally different like niche of the industry, right? That is something that worries me. I think we're seeing general technology in like the CPU and GPU fields get very specialized with some of their features. AMD and NVIDIA keep going back and forth, and Intel as well, so that they all have like the same features. One person comes up with it, the other two implement it. But I don't know how Apple is going to fit into this with the M1. Like, if you look back, you've got like G-Sync and FreeSync with variable refresh rate. Then you've got ray tracing with like the other cards. Then you've got like smart access memory now with the AMD cards. Can Apple keep up with this if they're starting their own new line of CPUs that are custom and they're on ARM? Like, are we going to reach a point where ray tracing is standard and everyone is using ray tracing and Apple is the only one that isn't because their ARM processors can't handle it or something like that? Because that would be a terrifying prospect for Apple.
It's definitely Apple's. I think, and these two will probably have a bit more to say about me. It's the idea of, again, riding their own market right now, I think is their biggest thing. It's that I think their pitch overall is going to be that we have this one thing we created and this is how well it performs. Because the reality is, no matter how fast your parts are, if you build a system specifically for one purpose, not just one purpose, but one, like, I guess, field, which they're constructing everything in these devices, it will always be faster. Every single part is working together seamlessly with the other. And that's something that they are probably going to, if they pull this off successfully,
I'd like to elaborate
be
on
able
that too.
be able to kind of like push as
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just worried about some of the other features. Like, I'm just worried about some of the other bleeding edge.
I don't say about that because I think it's too soon. I'll let Phillip go on that because he probably has what to say as well.
I can say already Apple is making moves to try to use their hardware more effectively. If we're looking at the architecture of just the M1, for example, they have 16 cores. I'll just go through the entire architecture. It's 4 fast cores, like power cores, and then 4 cores that are for efficiency. They have an 8-core GPU, 7-core GPU for the MacBook Air, like the very lowest model. And I think that's just a byproduct of binning.
So 16 threads, not 16 cores.
No, 16 actual cores dedicated to machine learning. That's another thing that they have.
That must be like different than like CPU cores.
Yeah, no, it's divorced from the CPU cores. No. It's on its separate part of.
Because otherwise, that would imply a 24-core ARM CPU, which sounds insane.
No, it's 8 cores and then 8-core GPU, 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, and then 16-core ML. But when I'm talking ML,
It's like its own thing.
Very specific Apple only ML. I don't think you're gonna be able to go into TensorFlow and be like, yeah, let's use my 16 ML cores from Apple. Wow, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the machine learning cores, they're doing a specific function, just like those GPUs have like tensor cores and whatever in NVIDIA. And you see in the Intel generation of Macs, the T2 chip actually handles some, I think, H.264 and like H.265 10-bit encoding and decoding. So you already see, and when you export from Final Cut, I believe like the Mac tries to take advantage of all the hardware that you already have.
That I knew.
So Apple's already doing this for very specific things. Oh, also the Afterburner card on the Mac Pro, which I believe is specifically for like some random video codecs. So you see Apple already building hardwares for very specific applications or very specific like codecs or whatever.
I guess I can give you an example of like a terrifying example, Phillip. Like what if you're trying to run like a VR headset with ray tracing on, with like a GeForce experience overlay so that you have like your custom filters or like reshade or something, and you're recording it with OBS. You're gonna do that like on an ARM chip? That's terrifying. I don't know how like that's gonna work.
I think I just want to I kind of see where Gabe is going with this, because these AMD, Nvidia, and Intel have this laser focus and just no sidetracking, just going all in on like ray tracing, ray accelerators in this particular direction, which is super niche for high-end gamers and other uses, where like Apple is completely going over the ARM direction. I think there is a certain diversion and this divergence that's happening, and I guess only time will tell how far it'll actually be. But it could be pretty bad, where like some things you just can't get on an Apple device.
Oh, you're right. Like,
but DLSS is a good example.
Or DLSS,
like,
that's right.
Like for ray tracing, you could say that it's like specifically for gamers, and people on Macs aren't necessarily going to be playing games. DLSS, that's not necessarily true. Upscaling, you could upscale a ton of stuff to just make it look better. Like how long is it going to be? AMD is already a little bit behind NVIDIA. I would argue Apple is way behind either of them in getting that tech. So I guess I'm just worried if like they're almost taking on too much with like starting a new CPU line, super sketchy ARM, and they're behind on some of these features that might become mainstream soon.
I would say DLSS might actually work. DLSS might actually, I mean, something like that might actually work, since Apple has 16 cores on the M1 dedicated to machine learning. They could do it. Whether they have been doing that, like whether they've been developing that at all, I have no clue. I can't tell. But you're right. Apple might fall seriously behind on some very specific specific workloads, like ray tracing, for example. Haven't heard a peep at all from anything about ray tracing from Apple. And that could actually really help in the creative sphere. If you have dedicated processing units for ray tracing that makes your renders faster or whatever, that would actually be huge for the Mac. But you don't see them doing that now.
Somebody that works in Unity making games, like I could never imagine using an ARM processor, especially if I had to do something with ray tracing or an Apple like computer.
Yeah, really, I don't think most people who are on a Mac are going to be developing games. Like the Mac is very laser focused in a very specific niche that comes with like some 3D graphics work, like video editing. That's a big one, or like other productivity.
Which I will say, not great that during ARM launch, they were having issues with Adobe products. That is very much their niche. Yeah. It is really bad that like Photoshop and stuff isn't working.
Yeah,
that's very bad.
You're not getting Photoshop is having to run through Rosetta emulation right now.
That's really bad.
Which is very.
I mean, it's okay, but like it's very much not what they're pandering towards with the ARM.
Yeah. I'm a Mac creative that uses no Adobe products. I use all Apple stuff. Like I use Final Cut for video editing. Yeah, I'm sorry.
There's a word for that. It's shill.
I mean, I use Logic for audio stuff because Adobe has nothing good for like music production. So I mean, everything works obviously because it's in-house Apple stuff. I haven't really tackled any Adobe Suite products. I haven't used any of them actually. And I know Apple's working with Adobe to, port their apps over natively. I wonder if they'll do it in time because Photoshop is not out yet. It's going to come out, I think, 2021 sometime. I don't remember exactly when. I'm going to be that guy and say it's not a big deal now because it's the MacBook Air and the Pro 13-inch. Those are products that most professionals aren't going to adopt right now. They're going to be sticking with their Intel systems and then adopting the ARM version of that.
As long as we treat this as a proof of concept, ARM is awesome. Like, that's what it is.
Absolutely.
It's a proof of concept.
I think what people remember is we're going to have to wait 6 to 8 to 12 months for a 16-inch MacBook Pro announcement anyway. And I think by that time, they'll have enough. Yeah, they'll have enough time to actually get stuff done. Like they could probably already have some Adobe Suite apps already natively on ARM by the time they announce a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which could be a game changer for somebody deciding to buy it or not. So I think as Phillip has been reiterating throughout, it is just the bottom baseline models that they've refreshed with the M1. And we're going to just have to wait and see what they do with the 16-inch MacBook Pro and the Mac Pro.
This is when it gets to another question. Would you trade your current Mac for one of these M1 Macs?
Look at these boys.
I wouldn't trade anything for a Mac, much less a new one.
All right.
Gabe, let's go. Let's go.
Would you trade a ham sandwich for a Mac, Gabe? Be honest with me.
I'm not sure. It depends on how hungry I am at the moment.
I think Phillip, I think I'll wait probably for M2 and maybe even M3 before I think of changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very seriously considering being one of those early adopters, and then I realized, wait, I use Homebrew. That's not really running very well on Apple Silicon at all. Wait, I can't do this. Yeah.
Come on, Phil, you got this, man.
I'll just watch from afar. All right.
Yeah.
So Dom and I will watch from afar. We'll get popcorn, go to like a home theater, just watch it all in full.
I'll
A
send you
home
my ThinkPads,
theater.
thank you.
A home theater running
Yeah.
off your Apple TV with a new.
And never, ever.
Yeah, I'm good,
Never.
bro. Holy cow.
Okay, so there is one more thing. We are at the 1 hour mark now. There is one more thing that if we're going to call ourselves a weekly news podcast, we have to cover, unfortunately.
Wow.
Which is the launch of the next gen consoles. Most of this is memery. The next gen consoles are actually significant. They're pretty cool devices. But do any of us actually have any sort of interest in consoles? Like, I don't use consoles personally.
I think when I do use something, I'm very invested. So I've had a PS2, PS3, PS4, and I am gonna
look at
and
this
I am-
guy. Look
An
at
Apple shill and a Sony shill. I see.
This man is double
Okay.
teaming it right now.
I think I might get a PS5, but not right now because like it's impossible to get basically. But I will say the PS5 controller is some cool shit technology.
You're right.
Like this, the stuff they're doing with the pressure sensitivity for feedback, haptic feedback on the hand when you're playing is so cool. Xbox just sucks, so don't buy an Xbox, people.
Slow down there, Vineet. Slow down. We don't want to lose viewers.
So yeah, let's just quickly introduce what happened. So PS5 came out November 12th. That is 7 days ago at the time of recording. The Xbox Series X, which is the competitor, came out November 10th, 2 days before the PS5. And both of them have had copious issues at launch. I imagine they're similarly priced. I don't know. The PS5 keeps bricking when people put certain discs into it and download updates, and like it bricks and whatever.
And the way they handle storage is just funny, dude.
Yeah.
Like what they're doing with storage is just hilarious. Also, but I will say, I think what something Sony could do, I don't know what exactly it's called, but they have this screen type thing on the PS4 and 5 controller. And they haven't They really haven't done anything with it yet, as on the PS4 at least. I think
like the little LED screen, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think in the next gen console, hopefully some games do utilize it properly, because I feel like that could really differentiate from the Xbox.
It's very gimmicky. It is very gimmicky. It's like the equivalent of like that SteelSeries mouse that has like the little screen on the side. It's like
you could basically say it's Apple's Touch ID, but for a PS4.
No way.
I mean,
you need Touch ID to get into your PS5, bro.
No, that's like the Asus. Was it the video book or whatever? The ViewBook, where they put like the screen. They put the screen on the trackpad.
There was a creator that seriously uses that. Sarah Dici, she does like YouTube and like video editing stuff. She uses that second screen for stuff. That's actually.
I bet you could use that as like a stream deck too.
Yeah, you could.
Console controllers shouldn't be gimmicky. That's not what they should be going.
It was a matter of time.
Exactly.
But I think again, we're seeing this divergence in like, I think not only in the computer industry but also in the gaming industry, where like even though Sony and Xbox are basically the only two players now, I think nobody uses a V anymore. But you can see how Xbox is trying to go more on the online gaming route, where like it's like, okay, just Xbox Pass and like try to get it in, like port it into the, like, I guess compete with Google Stadia. But where PS5 is mostly going for just, okay, hardcore gaming, Spider-Man remasters, making games look as pretty and efficient as possible. So I think there is a slight divergence in what type of gaming you want to choose, which I think is interesting.
It's like the gaming Zodiac, which kind of like product that you end up going with.
BuzzFeed quiz: which console are you? When were you born? Last four numbers of credit card. No, okay. So I will give my quick thoughts on this. I don't think we need to spend too long on consoles because I don't think any of us have too much to talk about.
Who cares about consoles?
So Yeah, both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X have been having issues. The PS5 has been bricking. The Series X apparently has like a weird clipping noise, which like maybe there's a fan clipping and stuff like that. Yeah. Apparently, also some people got their Series X without like any packing on the box. Like it was just there and it like rattled around, I guess. There's also like obviously scalpers and people stealing them. And
you see them all the way on Instagram on BU Gigs. It's like I'm trying to sell my PS5 for like $12,000, and like a lifetime supply of Cheetos.
Didn't BU Gigs put them there or something too?
Oh no, BU Gigs made fun of them. They're like, look at the scalper. I'm not putting this up for serious.
I think props to the PS5 and Xbox. They aren't too expensive. I will say they aren't.
The consoles definitely have a place, especially. I know we're all very big PC guys, but the consoles do really have their place. The prices are not bad. Console killers are actually becoming a lot.
They're becoming harder.
Exactly, because the old games also are pushing farther. Like a lot of these new AAA titles that are running so well. I will give a good example. I'll give Assassin's Creed as a good one. I know Ubisoft has never been great at optimizing their games. I know Odyssey. I had some very lovely experiences trying to run it on a 2080. And I was still only able to do high on 1440p without some...
Wow, what a struggle.
I know, right?
I run all my games that low for like 200 FPS. But the thing
is, for a system of that price, consoles have been running that at 4K really well.
Well, like 30 FPS, but like because they're only like 30 hertz. But like, yes,
cinematic. It's cinematic.
Very good. Stick some black bars, like blur it all, and it looks great.
When the
Spider-Man Remastered does look good though.
Turn that anti-aliasing all the way up. It'll be fine.
Dude, when the cutscenes come up in Assassin's Creed, I see my
No, I agree. Tank. So I have a couple. So I did actually account for this being the situation. And instead, what I thought that we could talk about regarding the consoles is what would it take of somebody doing with a console to make us interested in them again? Like, when would we consider a console? And I think the example that I can give for me is I actually own a Switch because I think the Switch is, it's a console, but it's very different to the other consoles. It has its niche. For one, the exclusives brought me to it. I wanted to play Mario Kart and I wanted to play Pokemon. And second of all, it's portable, which is, it provides an actually different use case to my desktop. I could never see myself booting up like a PS5 or an Xbox instead of my desktop, especially now that Microsoft has been putting all of their games on the Microsoft Store, so you can just buy them on PC instead of buying them on Xbox for a lot of them. So that's why I'm not super interested in those. But the Switch is an interesting niche for me. So what would it take for these new consoles? Like, what would you like to see them add that would make you interested in consoles again?
First of all, it would have to be a PC.
Oh, great. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I'll get right on that. Install Linux on it, and then I'm interested.
You can on the old PS3s, like some of the old fat PS3s, you could run like BSD or something on it. It was incredible. Fine. Anyways, I'll actually give a real answer. I don't know, actually, because I play very specific games, and those are the only games I ever play. I play Valorant competitively, and that has been the game that I've been playing
both
forever.
Of us do. For the record, so we can't play competitive FPS games on console.
No, I wouldn't.
Not gonna do that.
You would need a lot for me to play on a console, because when I think of gaming, I game very specifically. It's almost always competitively. If it's not, then it's casual in some sense, but there's still some competitive aspect to it. I would have to use a mouse and keyboard as my input device. I really can't stand the controller for anything.
So
other
you just
than,
want a PC?
I basically just want a PC. There's nothing the console can do unless it became a PC, and I could play PC games on it. That's just because of the games I play. That's no other reason, really.
Then you're just buying a pre-built, right?
Yeah, in which case there's no fun in that.
I think for me, I guess I think a console did lose some of its, I guess, allure, because like the most popular games at any point of time, like anything like Apex or like Fortnite or anything, they're all cross-platform now. So before, I think 2-3 years ago, because I think me and all my friends had a PS4, we'd all just play Fortnite only on PS4, and like we wouldn't have to, and somebody who wasn't a PS4 couldn't play with us. So I think before, like 3 years ago, consoles had their allure where like they were kind of closed down in the most popular titles, even if those popular titles are available across consoles. But now that they're cross-platform, I don't know. I could just buy a PC and play any game I want.
Yeah, pretty much. Other than platform exclusives, like like PS4 exclusives or Xbox exclusives.
Nintendo is the obvious company.
Yeah, Nintendo, exactly. We got Simu though. You got emulators.
Who's gonna buy a PS5 to just play Spider-Man? Come on.
Yeah.
I feel like someone would. Hey, dude, they did us dirty with Red Dead. They did us real dirty with Red Dead too. was so
Here's the one
hurt
thing
by
that I want to point out as well. We keep talking about Apple and how they can make their products really good because they create the whole product and they create the whole environment. Consoles could do that. Like, what if they made a console which was capable of matching the ray tracing performance of a $1,500 PC, but for $500? It had ray tracing, it hits like high FPS. You work with game developers to make games that are specifically optimized for that console. Maybe you could actually get like way better price for performance for a console than a PC. Or, for example, you could provide more of like an experience. Like, what if they sold a console and they put more emphasis on flight simulators? So you can buy like a whole like rig with it and you have like a chair or something that moves around. Or like VR. Like, I own an Oculus Rift, so I'm not a great example. But if I didn't own a Rift, I would be very interested in buying a console that came with VR that was like made for that and worked kind of like the PSVR, but not trash. So I would love to see them going more in that direction of providing more the experience, the complete product, because as we've just said for Apple, that's one of the strong suits with this approach.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things too contributing to this is that the barriers to entry for getting a PC have increased a lot over the past few years. I mean, if you look back, and I compared to 2016, when I look back to 2016 when I built my system, that was a time where PC was still, it was the best value too. But that's no longer really the case here, especially with the price of some of these components and the fact that a lot of these games have gotten to a point where they require such high-end tech to run effectively that consoles actually are a very valid choice now. I mean, you could see that very well happen if we keep improving at the rate we are and prices don't stay down. That'll definitely be something interesting to see because we already have these PCs. We have our devices already. All we're doing is upgrading it. But building from scratch now, I remember I've helped a few people in recent weeks put together systems. And I've told them, like, this is not the best time to buy. Price just looking really up, as we were talking about earlier. But you're looking at, for $1,000 now, some of the stuff you get just isn't as good as it used to be. I mean, you have to hit even the $2,000 mark now is what I'm seeing is kind of like being a good sweet spot for high-end games, which is completely absurd to me now, but it's just, again, it's weird that this is normal to us now. All this price shift is very drastic when you compare, and this has only been 4 years. I mean, what was it like? Technology just since the .com boom has skyrocketed. I mean, we were back in the early 2000s. It was the road to 3 gigahertz, I think, and then you've got Intel pushing up like upwards of 5 gigahertz. I mean, I know I have an 8086K that I use. I run it.
Oh, that goes into your ARM-A story, doesn't it?
Oh, well, I run it. Long story TLDR, my motherboard bricked when I was using my 1700X, and as a gift, I got an 8086K. I was going to big Ryzen again, but I was like, fine, whatever. Runs at, 1.2 volts, 4.8 gigahertz was insane. I can't push it to 5 though, because
performance, yeah.
Oh, it's such a hot chip, though. I can't push it to 5. I can't do it. I'll throttle. I have an AIO, and I'll still throttle. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's going off topic. That's what we were talking about before. But as you said again, will consoles create this new space? They've had the space for a while, but if we look strictly at games, consoles are definitely gaining a lot of ground there and a lot of validity in that space, specifically because they're offering they're offering great performance for their price. Just not like a PC. Console killers used to be, again, that $600 PC that would run these high-end games, great for times. Well, not really anymore. I mean, how much is the Series X? Is it like $400?
Let's search that up.
The PS4 came out in 2013.
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah, and that was when console killers were like in their prime.
Exactly. No, console killers were at a point.
How has it been that long?
It's insane. Yeah, it's been a long time.
How much are these consoles, by the way?
Crazy.
I think the PS5 is $500.
Series X is $500. Series S is $300.
That's not the Series
PS5 digital only $400. Like, those price points are ridiculous. They're making a loss on these.
It's actually so much bang for your buck.
Yeah, they're making a loss.
I have no idea how they're so cheap. I think it's
a loss. It's a loss leader because they're making their money back up on like either accessories or games.
It's gotta be. The games are more expensive. I think there was 50 to 60 a pop before. Now they're like 70 to 80.
Controllers are kind of crazy expensive too. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like you have to get like the charging thing for it and the replacement batteries and the cable and the headset and like that's all proprietary. You spent like $200 on like a set.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right though. The peripherals do matter, and also the price of games.
Oh, you kidding me, dude? You're in 5th grade. You got your Turtle Beach headset. Taking it back on the couch.
Turtle Beach, dude. Those things sounded like hot garbage.
Well, you got to be able to talk in your COD lobby, right? I mean, you have to be able to talk in your COD lobby.
Nothing of value is ever said in the COD lobby.
actually.
I think a major problem that these consoles have is that I guess most of the games that people would play on a console, like a Madden or an NBA, these games have sucked for like 4 years now, and they haven't been improving.
Yeah.
So like
And they've
at
gotten
least
more expensive.
for me personally, like I bought a PS4 for Madden and 2K, and I think Call of Duty Ghost was the game then, so I got it for that too. But Madden and NBA haven't been making the games well. So I think the consoles kind of have been limited by like the most popular games are not actually improving. So I think
That's why
a
Nintendo is like
problem.
really redeemable,
You're right.
I think, because Nintendo has a really cool thing going. All their games are so high quality and like so good.
For an NFL or an NBA fan, there is no game on a PC you can play. Like there isn't. Like you have to have a console and you have to have a 2K.
Well, you can play them on PC, but it just there's no point if that's solely what you're buying your
Yeah.
device for. There's absolutely no reason. I mean, most people now, and
Casuals.
you're seeing this exactly. Well, you're seeing, for example, that people who just want to play games, they have their laptops for work. They don't
Yeah.
need these big devices.
Sounds
like
very
we have.
similar,
right.
except
Stick an ARM processor in your console. There you go. You have your niche. They don't care about performance. They don't care about anything else. Stick an ARM thing. Drop it by another $100 because it's ARM now. It hits you literally pay Apple to use their M1 or their M3 or whatever when it has ray tracing and stuff. Then I will buy a console. If a console is another $100 cheaper and it has ray tracing and DLSS, I will play it.
I was listening to another podcast. This was something that
Oh
somebody
my
brought
gosh.
up. If this happens and Apple, for some reason, decided to lend out their CPUs for the consoles, it's over.
That would actually be
They won't.
super solid
They,
for console.
they
It will
won't.
never happen. But like
they won't because Apple is all about their niche. They want to stick in their
zero
lane.
chance that you
Zero
no
chance
way.
it happens. But if it did, that would be something.
That'd be crazy.
Hey, maybe AMD is gonna get in the ARM game.
I wouldn't be surprised, dude. They're gonna fight a four-pronged war. They're gonna fight like Nvidia, Intel, like the what's it called, server CPUs, and like Apple with the
Hey,
ARM.
I mean,
That'd
the
be
moral of the
crazy.
story is Intel is getting wrecked by all fronts. On the
oh my-
desktop by AMD, on the server probably by AMD.
Laptop side too.
on
Could
the
you imagine if in
laptops
like
by
a year
Apple.
AMD just drops like an ARM CPU that's just way better than M1 or M2, and Apple's just like, actually, you know, this whole experiment's been fun. Think we'll just go with the AMD ARM.
Yeah.
They haven't
might.
been able to go to from 14 to 10 nanometers. I think you're dreaming too much.
Maybe. And Apple's already on 5 nanometers, so yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly,
TSMC.
no.
Hey,
AMD's definitely
invest.
a power player though right now. AMD is hauling.
Very
The
fast.
two A's.
It's
The
insane.
two A's. AMD on x86 is huge. Apple on ARM is also another. Is,
But
I
that
think, a
only
leader to
matters
look
for Apple.
It
So,
only
like, they
matters
don't
for
really-
Apple right now.
They're just like in their little safe house. They don't really talk to other companies and stuff.
No.
They just do their own thing.
But Intel can catch a break. I don't think there's a company that's
They're
had a
so
worse.
screwed.
They can't. They
Can't
can't
catch
catch
a
up in
break.
like the laptop space. They can't catch up on the desktop.
Yeah, this might be the worst we've seen since like Yahoo or something. Since Yahoo got
pretty bad.
screwed in the,
The only
2000s.
things I can remember, like IBM, Yahoo, and now Intel.
IBM really screwed over completely though. I know they still operate independently inside of Lenovo, but they were pretty screwed. Yahoo was bad though, dude. Yahoo was like, what? Didn't Yahoo try to like? Didn't they like try to buy? Weren't they gonna buy Google or something? Like, what happened there?
We just have to
fucking-
wait. We just have to wait for 5
AMD
years.
buying Intel when?
No way.
Dude,
that would
stop.
never. That would never.
You know how
fly.
like EA bought the company Maxis. That's the company that makes like the Sims games and like SimCity. They
Mm-hmm.
bought the company Maxis and then promptly fired everyone and like discontinued all their projects. Just
That's
to have AMD do that. Intel, come with us. We'll get you right back up. Buys them, fires everyone. Intel gone, completely closed.
that would never fly in the US.
Definitely not an antitrust lawsuit.
What would
Dude,
what would happen? Yeah, AMD was probably like, here's just a bunch of money because we really don't want to be sued by the entire U.S. government right now. Just like get to 10 nanometer for the love of God, please.
Intel has to just like
It's getting sad now.
14
I know, it
nanometer
actually
plus. I don't know how many pluses there are.
We have chosen to delay Zen 4 so that Intel can get to 10 nanometers before we get to 5 nanometers.
give them a
it's
fair
ready.
fight.
We're just not going to be releasing it. We are now working on 2
Actually,
nanometers.
Intel, their next generation, I think is gonna. I think Intel's actually trying to squeeze more out of the 14 nanometers still.
They are.
Just
I think they're going to be on 10 or 7 and like I think earliest possible 2024.
2024.
They're saying
way.
2021 for 10, but I don't believe it.
No. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
Yo,
It's weird how we've gone from everyone just beating on Intel, hating them to like, you stop, they're already dead. Hold on.
stop it.
I feel like we hated them, and now we kind of feel bad for them. And now we're like,
No,
hey, come
dude,
on.
they are the evil overlords, okay? We cannot forget their war crimes.
No one expected AMD to just absolutely beat it into them.
There's somebody writing a book right now, interviewing people that's going to be released in 5 years. How Intel failed. Like I can guarantee
It's gonna be like one of
you.
those like business stories you learn in like
Yeah.
Questrom in business school.
And
Yeah.
then like 15 years from now, that's the go-to business story. Like, okay, in business school, this is what they teach you. Don't be Intel.
It's like, don't be Intel. If you have market share lead, do not step off the gas.
Dude, Intel just...
Be more like Nvidia than
yeah.
Intel.
Yeah, because NVIDIA at least is trying to push. NVIDIA, if they now just lower their prices, it'll be pretty much even competition.
It's not. I feel like we're not expecting Intel to dominate. We just want it to be like Nvidia, compete.
Yeah, Intel's just
Yeah, do
not at this
something.
I want them to
point.
trade blows, so it's a hard decision which processor to get. Because ever since Ryzen dropped, I'm like, there's no point in myself buying an Intel CPU.
I don't even look at the Intel stuff anymore. It's literally like
I don't look at
so
it,
much
exactly.
better. Like if you only care about single core, there's maybe a chance that you would consider Intel. But as somebody who does like rendering workloads and like Unity workloads, Maya 3D application, it's not even close, mate. Like I can't even. It's not worth my time to look at Intel.
And bro, my compiler needs more cores, dude.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I
Get
can
outta here.
see why, huh?
Bro, I crashed my system almost crashed once. I have 30 gigabytes of memory, and my system almost crashed. It was so bad.
What
I
are you
remember,
compiling? File of like Firefox 30 times?
bro. I was sitting here like, please don't do it. Please, Gen 2, stop. Compiler,
Oh,
stop.
this man is compiling his own kernel.
Okay. Well, I think that at this point we have now been going for like an hour and 20. That pretty much covers everything that's been going on recently regarding big tech. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch upon that I didn't talk about?
Yeah, I'm on MySpace.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
Get outta here.
This man's on Internet Explorer.
IE6.
IE6.
You're the
bro.
reason why my job is painful as a web developer.
Yeah, you're like the 0.006%. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually using a Model M right now.
Wow, this man's a hipster.
I know, right? I'm on a 720p.
This man is running a ThinkPad like T420, and it's got like the old school like 768 monitor, like the P. Yeah.
Okay.
Easy, dude.
Well, I think if that's everything, then we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you guys all for joining me. This has been Hotspot. I'm your host, Gabriel Moncau, and yeah, I think it's been good. It's been a good time.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you.